Hey everybody, this is Steven from PopCultureMaven.com. We're back with this week's new comic book reviews, and with the holiday being right around the corner, so this is actually a pretty light week. So I think there are a fair amount of new books this week. There's some good returning books, but I think it's also a time. I know my comic shop's doing a Black Friday sale. Hopefully, maybe yours is, but this might be a good week to maybe pick some stuff up that you hadn't previously bought, or try something new this week. So let's get right to it. First up, we have Girl Scouts Stone Ghost #1, written and drawn by Jim Mahfood. So this is somewhat I don't want to say it's a sequel. It's more of a story in the same universe as Mahfoud. The previous year or so ago, he did a Girl Scout story, but this one is more. It's different. So you don't have to have read the first one to read this one. So with that being said, the basic story is this girl is trying to get off the planet. She's going somewhere, and this guy she knows helps set her up with a bodyguard. He's bounty hunter, but he's a bodyguard. So they take off. We find out that the guy who helped her set it up is double crossing her. The mob wants the girl, so that's what it is. And then they get to the planet where she wants to go, and the mob goes to pick him up, and the bodyguard's like, "Hey, well, I'm out because that's the mob. I'm not involved with it." So that's really the basic setup for this first issue. It's really an interesting story. I think there was one part that I really enjoyed where he actually told her story in a flashback of how she kind of ended up where she is with her boyfriend having cancer and all this kind of stuff. And it really made for an interesting backstory to her, and it helped set up her characters. Mahfood really does a good job of setting everything up really well here. He lays out the story. It's a pretty basic story, but I think I really enjoyed it. And then I'm a really big fan of his artwork. And now I know that he's the type of artist that's going to run hot or cold with you, but I think he really brings a lot of style and uniqueness to his stories, and it really works well. I actually really enjoyed this first issue, and I think it's off to a good start. If you're definitely looking for something different, I mean, it's a basic story, but it had a good different feel that you don't really see in a lot of mainstream books. So I think it's well worth checking out. Next up, we have Hulk #1, written by Donny Cates with artwork by Ryan Ottley. So Donny Cates had been writing Venom, and Al Ewing was writing Hulk. So when they ended their runs, they switched. So Al Ewing is now writing Venom, and Donny Cates is now writing Hulk. So what the basic setup here is Bruce Banner is basically like using the Hulk. He's driving the Hulk like a kaiju, like say in Pacific Rim. So whenever he needs more power and stuff, he just pisses off the Hulk so he gets more power. And so I will say, because I haven't finished reading The Immortal Hulk, there is obviously some threads of storylines from that go into this that you'll be a little lost, but it's not too bad. Apparently an incident happened with the Hulk, and now he's going after the Avengers, or the Avengers are coming after him. And so in that case, I will say that it might have been a bit of a good idea to maybe explain a little bit more of that in depth, or at least have the front page of previously on Hulk that would have set that stuff up. But otherwise, I don't think it's fatal. I think it was a little annoying, but it wasn't ultimately fatal. I did like the story. I think it's got a good setup. And then you have Ottley's artwork, and obviously everybody knows that Ryan Ottley comes from his big book is Invincible, and he really brings his A game here. This was really a good looking book, and I think the other thing is, I think Kate takes advantage of having Ottley on the book with certain. I mean, he sets things up that visually Ottley just brings his A game to. And I think it's a really interesting story. Like I said, little tad loss for possibility for new readers, but nothing, thankfully it's not fatal. It was a little disappointing. I think it would have been a little helpful to explain things a little better, but ultimately not fatal. And I think it gets off to a good start, and he gives a really good reason to come back for the second issue. So we'll kind of see where this one goes. But I did like this book, and I think it's worth checking out this week. Next up, we have Good Boy #1, written by Garrett Gunn and Christina Blanche, with artwork by Kit Wallace. Now, I'll be really honest, most books from Source Point Print are not really, sadly, that good. A lot of it is the story may be good, but the art is not so good. This one actually overall is pretty decent. I will say the two writers obviously were huge fans of John Wick, because the basic story is John Wick, except for instead of a guy, it's the dog. So his owner has died, and now the dog is getting revenge from the owner. It really is that simple. So after a while, as I'm reading through it, it's like, oh, this is this. I'm like, wow, it feels like John Wick. And then after a while, it's like, no, it is just John Wick. In that case, I wouldn't say this is not original at all, but there was something charming about it. I like I said, it wasn't great, but it was a bit surprising, especially for Source Point Print, which, like I said, is usually really a challenge on a good book. I will say Wallace's artwork is actually really nice. It has a bit of a cartoony style, which I think actually works well. And I think by having it that way, I think even though you're sitting there just reading John Wick, I think the art kind of helps you not feel like you're just that it isn't 100% rehash. I'd say it's about a 90% rehash, but the 10% of his artwork really does help. Like I said, look, it's not anything particularly brilliant. It is just John Wick. It's they've just switched the dog to Keanu, and that's all it is. But it was okay. It was what it was. It wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. But for Source Point Print, it was kind of a win. So there we go. Next up, we have Black Panther #1, written by John Ridley, with artwork by Juan Cabal. So this is a new jumping on point for Black Panther. John Ridley, he's writing currently a DC I Am Batman. He also wrote the other history of the DC universe, which was really, really wonderful. If you haven't checked that out, I really recommend it. He's been writing quite a few comics. He's a screenwriter. He wrote 12 Years a Slave and some other films. So I think he was a good choice for Black Panther. I think once again, it's like the Hulk, that there are some story threads from the previous run that are not fully explained super well, but they're not fatal enough to keep it from being a mess. I will say the one thing he does really smart here is he sets up the story. So this first storyline is kind of a murder mystery. The underpinnings is a basic murder mystery, which is always a good, smart move to do, because if you have just a basic structure of, say, a murder mystery, then that allows you to do other things with the story of setting things up in this new storyline that you're telling and stuff like that, while having the murder mystery have a bit of the focus of the main story. So it's an easy story element to do while doing other things. And then that keeps the exposition from just overwhelming the story. So it allows him to set things up, but here I'm going to check in on this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to talk to my sister and have her do, check on things and stuff like that. So it allows a balance of the two, which is a really smart move. The first issue, it's a solid first issue. It didn't necessarily blow me away, but it was solid, and that's always good. Cabal's artwork is actually really quite nice. It has a good look to it. Does a nice job of telling the story and everything. It's off to a decent start. So I think it's kind of worth checking out. Next up, we have Joy Operations #1, written by Brian Michael Bendis, with artwork by Stephen Byrne. So after reading this first issue, unfortunately, I can say I have honestly no idea what Bendis is trying to do here. I will say that apparently this might be a new record for a book, because the F word the F bomb is dropped like 1 billion times. It's like every page has at least probably 10. The problem here is that he he really just, as he's sadly done lately, his dialogue is just overwhelming the book. And then the problem is, I wouldn't mind that if I was actually getting a story to go with it. But unfortunately, there's really no story here. I don't know what the point of the main character is. She's obviously some sort of detective, I think. It's not very well spelled out. And it's a convoluted mess. And I just don't understand what Bendis is thinking here. It's one of those things to where the world, there's this, it's obviously maybe set in the future, I think, and there's this world and all this stuff, but there's just nothing to grab onto. There's nothing to hang on to. Even the main character is just like, I don't hate her, I don't love her, I really didn't care because I didn't get to know her, and that was a fatal flaw. Honestly, the only thing this book really has going for it is Byrne's artwork, which is really, really nice. It's a good looking book. It's just unfortunately the story is just such a mess, and it's just, I have no idea what the hell's going on, and that is just fatal. So this one is sadly a big skip this week. I wanted to like it. I didn't hate it. I just didn't understand it. Really, there was kind of no point to this first issue, and that's the fatal flaw of this. Next up, we have House of Slaughter #2, with a story by James Tynion IV and Tate Bromble. The script is written by Tate Bromble with art by Chris Sheehan. So as we set up, so Aaron is becoming a hunter for monsters, and he gets a roommate from another faction. So he's saying the black faction, and his new roommate Jace is in the white faction. And apparently the fractions don't get along, apparently. So, but we start to learn, we know that Aaron is the good guy and the Jace is the bad guy. But we're learning the story of one, how they met and how they basically forged a relationship, and it wasn't just friends. It was actually, they fell in love with each other. So we're learning as this story goes along what is led up to them becoming together and what is going to break them apart, apparently. So that's really interesting. I have to give Bromble, he did the Barbalian Black Hammer book over at Dark Horse, which was absolutely amazing. He really brings a good story here. And I like the fact that it feels very much like something is killing the children, but it's obviously charting its own course, which I really like. So it's obvious Tynion has laid out the structure of like how it fits into that world, into that story. But it really is Bromble. You can tell that it's Bromble's script, and it's really good. I'm really enjoying it. I love the pacing of it. I love how the story just kind of washes over, that they're revealing stuff, but not quite. They're just letting it unfold, which is really smart. Sheehan's artwork's actually really nice, does a nice job, really complements the story. It's a good looking book. And even if you haven't read Something is Killing the Children, I think you can still read this on its own. It does stand on its own, even though it falls in that universe. You just have to know that these characters go out and fight monsters. That's really what you need to know, and they tell you that in the first issue, and you get a little more taste of that in the second issue. I think it's off to, I really enjoyed the first issue. I think the second issue is really solid. I think it's really worth checking out, even if haven't read Something is Killing the Children. Next up, we have DC versus Vampires, written by James Tynion IV and Matthew Rosenberg, with artwork by Otto Schmidt. Now, I actually was pretty surprised by this. It got off to a good start, and it's basically, instead of zombies, it's vampires. It really, but I like the fact that, well, this issue really centers around Batman trying to figure out if any of his team are vampires, and that was actually a really interesting part of the story. I really enjoyed that. And then we find out, obviously, from last issue, a bit of a spoiler if you didn't read it, so it's been a month. That Green Lantern, we know, is a vampire, and there's some really interesting things that go on with him in the Flash. I don't want to give it away, but I was really impressed with that part of the story, that Rosenberg and Tynion have set things up really well, and it's moving along really nicely. Schmidt's artwork's really nice. It fits the story. He does a good job. And like I said, it's just it's a pretty basic story that instead of zombies infiltrating, it's now vampires, and that's really it. It's one of those books. It's not going to it's not mind-numbingly brilliant, but it's fun. It's solid. It does its job well, and that's sometimes that's all you need. Next up, we have Task Force Z, written by Matthew Rosenberg with pencils by Eddie Barrows and inks by Eber Ferreira. So this is the opposite, but this is Suicide Squad with zombies. So what it is the Red Hood is heading Task Force Z with basically zombie versions. So there's like Zombie Bane, Zombie Man Bat. And so it's kind of like the monster slash zombie version. And so now we learn that a lot of this zombie stuff has to do with the Lazarus pit and Lazarus juice or whatever you want to call it. So that's kind of, which is once again why Red Hood, a Jason Todd is part of this, is part of the team, because he's been dead once, except for he's alive now. So yeah, it is what it is. I mean, look, Rosenberg, look, I wasn't, the first issue didn't overwhelm me, but I will say the second issue was a bit more solid. I think it really stabilized out a little bit more. The first issue, I think, kind of maybe threw too much or something, but I will give Rosenberg that he kind of got it back on track. And I really love Eddie Barrows' artwork. It's a really nice looking book. He does a great job, especially with the zombies and the kind of monster and kind of creepy stuff. It's a good looking book. Once again, it's a lot like DC versus Vampire. It is what it is. It's not, there's nothing in it that particularly shocked me, but it was a solid read. And it does its job pretty well. So once again, if you're looking for zombies and vampires, these books are pretty decent and worth checking out. Next up, we have Echolands #4, written by J.H. Williams III and W. Hayden Blackman, with artwork by J.H. Williams III. Now, once again, we go back to the main reason we're all buying this book is because J.H. Williams' artwork is just brilliant. But I will say, as this book has gone along, I really like this story where you have this ragtag kind of superhero-ish team, and they're on a journey. It's a basic structure here. But I think what's interesting is I like how the journey is unfolding. It's one of those, it's a pretty basic, somewhat superhero trope and all that kind of stuff. And but there's something about it. I think part of it is that the story, the way that they sprinkle in these different kind of mythologies and stuff like that, which is kind of interesting. You know, there's like in this issue and the previous issue, kind of a Kirby feel to one of the lands that they go to, which was a nice touch. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, I will definitely say it's a bit of a slow burn on the story, that it's moving along at a pretty leisurely pace, but it's kind of working. And like I said, it's one of those where I like the story. But it really, the artwork just really elevates that story to where it just visually, it just like it's mind blowing. It's a gorgeous looking book. It's probably one of the best looking books I've seen in a long time. It's just it's brilliant looking. But the story is good, and I'm enjoying it. And we'll kind of see where they go. I think hopefully the next issue we might kind of get to see some more oomph to it. So as far as the story goes, so we'll see. But still, I'm enjoying it. Next up, we have Superman 78 #4, written by Robert Venditti, with artwork by Wilfredo Torres. So this one continues to really bring that Donner universe to comics, and they're doing it quite well. This issue really centers around, so obviously Superman went with Brainiac, and he's now in, basically, instead of the bottled city of Kandor, it's the bottled city of Krypton with his parents. So he gets to meet his parents again, which is really interesting. And so we also find out that Lex Luthor had bugged Superman so he could talk to him. And it's really interesting because, once again, this is set in 78, where technology is, there's not cell phones or anything like that. So it's really kind of genius how Venditti is using somewhat different technology, but it makes sense because Lex Luthor built, has things like this. He creates, he's the mad scientist. So it's interesting because he basically brings, by doing this, it tips off Brainiac. He's like, hey, wait a second, there's somebody talking, and so I need to go back to Earth. So that's where this issue kind of lands, and then Brainiac's pretty pissed, and he's gonna basically take Metropolis and shrink it. Apparently, that's how this issue ends. But once again, I really have to hand it to Vendetti that it really continues to feel like the Donner universe, which is really the key here. And that Torres just continues to really just knock it out of the park with the artwork, because he captures the look and the feel of the actors from the Donner films. And that goes along with Vendetti. Really, like when you're reading it, you hear Margot Kidder, you hear Christopher Reeve, you hear Marlon Brando, and I think that's why this. Sure, it's a love letter to those films. It's an homage. It's sentimental, but hey, I love it, and I think it's great. And if you're a fan of the original Superman film, it continues to be really, really good. Next up, we have Batman Reptilian number 6, written by Garth Ennis and Liam Sharp. So this is the final chapter of the story. They wrap everything all up, and it has been a really amazing ride. And what's interesting is what I loved about this issue is that it didn't really have, it didn't wait till the end to have a climax. It actually, the main crux of the story ends pretty early in the issue, where they kill the baby, or they knock out the baby and everything. But it's really the aftermath, and it's kind of like a prologue, or not a prologue, but an afterwards to the story, which is really you don't see it very often. And I really have to give it to Ennis that it's really a smart move, because I think just having we captured the baby and everybody's safe now, that would have not been a great ending, where he actually gave it a much stronger ending by having that there's aftermath to it. And it's really, really good. And Sharp just continued. This is a gorgeous looking book. And what's really interesting, because we know that Steve Dillon was originally going to be the artist for this book. So in the back, there's a treatment that he wrote with, that was going to be because of Steve Dillon. There's also some pages by Liam Sharp that are very interesting, because it's more of his standard artwork, say similar to looking Brave and the Bold, but then he decided to paint the artwork. So it's really an interesting afterthought, and it was really a nice peek behind the curtain of how this book was created. And it's been a great ride. This has been a really solid story. I've really loved it, and it really is. I think it's been really, really great with Ennis' story and Sharp's artwork, which just continues to just be absolutely gorgeous. This has been a great book. If you've missed it, there'll be a trade of it soon, probably in the next couple of months. Definitely check it out. This was definitely very odd, outside the wheelhouse of normal Batman, and that's what I loved about it. It's just it really took that chance and went off in such a complete wild direction, and that's what made it so great. Next up, we have Black Hammer Reborn, number 6, written by Jeff Lemire, with artwork by Malachi Ward and Matthew Sheehan. So once again, we're still kind of we're about the halfway point, because it's 12 issues. So this issue really centers around Skull Digger, which is actually, I really enjoyed that miniseries. So I think it's great that Lemire is kind of bringing him back, because in a way, it's almost like he's creating a new Black Hammer team instead of the old team. And that's what's really interesting, is he's bringing a lot of the characters that he had done in these side miniseries to this main story. And it's really interesting, because in a way, it's really bringing that outside universe, that fringe universe that he created with those other stories, into a main story. And it's really just, it blows me away, because once again, if you haven't read those, I think you're okay, because Lemire writes this okay, here's Skull Digger. That's this just that now you don't know maybe all the details to his character, but you get enough. He makes sure you get enough to understand who the character is, that he's like a vigilante character. You get that. You totally get that. But I love the fact that he is bringing this new team and yet it's a team, or a lot of characters we already know. So it'll be really interesting to see if other characters from the other miniseries show up. And then Ward and Sheehan's artwork really does a nice job here. They just, I'm really loving this book. Everybody knows I'm a big Black Hammer fan, and if you're not reading these books, they're just really, really wonderful, and you really need to check it out. And I love it to death. It's another big pick this week. And finally, we have Wonder Woman Black and Gold #6. So this issue has story. Okay, so the first one's written and drawn by Marguerite Savage. Then we have the next story is written and drawn by Liam Sharp. Then we have the next story is written by Michael W. Conrad and Noah Bailey. Then we have the next story written by Christos Gage with artwork by Kevin Maguire. And then the final story is written by Dr. Sheena Howard with artwork by Jamal Campbell. So I have been a really big fan, and I love this. And this one has a really mixed bag, not in a bad way, but of different stories and styles. Now, a lot of the stories have been very inspirational and stuff like that. But then this issue had just some flat out like superhero stories, which was really great. The first one by Savage is really just a nice, once again, inspiring story, really hopeful and everything. And I really enjoyed it. Her artwork is absolutely gorgeous. It's wonderful. The next one by Liam Sharp is really interesting because it's almost like as if it's told from Liam Sharp's point of view. As a matter of fact, the character that's telling the story looks a lot like Liam Sharp. I have a funny feeling that he looked in the mirror to do it. But it's really interesting because it's really about how he dreams this story. Like he'll dream certain parts of the story, and then he tells this story. And it's just really interesting. It's such a unique way to tell a story that I really, really enjoyed it. And it's so different from what you normally expect from like a superhero story that I loved it. And of course, his artwork is just really, really wonderful. And a lot of it, he definitely used the black and white and then just added the gold when it was needed. It was really, really perfect. The next one by Conrad and Bailey is really interesting. It's one of those. It tells an inspirational story. It's about a guy who is he's like robbing a bank, and he has actually met Wonder Woman before. So in a way he's trying to reconnect with because he met her as a child. And she helped save his family. And so he's been kind of he's had troubles in life. And it's almost like she's a psychiatrist in a way to him. And it really is a beautiful story. It's really nice. The artwork is really, really exceptional. And it's a very touching, moving story. And it was really, really just so well done. It was really smart. The next one by, it's Gage and Maguire. Of course, Kevin Maguire's artwork, you can't go wrong with Kevin Maguire. So what this is, it's a Freaky Friday story. So Wonder Woman and Giganta change places where Giganta gets Wonder Woman's powers and Wonder Woman turns into like the 50-foot woman. And it's really like, it's really hilarious and it's really smart and fun. It's really just a ton of fun, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it's just, like I said, you have Kevin Maguire's artwork, which is really, really just wonderful. And it just does such a nice job. And then the final one by Howard and Campbell is really nice. It's it's Wonder Woman Nubia story, which is always kind of nice to see. How I love how when they bring in Nubia to work with Wonder Woman, because she is a really good character in the DC universe. So, and I'm glad that they're really starting to use her now. And this is just where they tag team. So what it is, Triton is tired of the humans, polluting the water and everything. So he's just basically like, I'm just going to kill them all because they suck. And so it's Nubia and Wonder Woman that kind of have to save the day. And it's a really short, sweet, smart story. Howard does a really good job, and Jamal Campbell's artwork is really, really gorgeous here. It's really just, once again, this book has really just impressed the hell out of me. I've really loved it to death, and it's if you've once again, you don't have to read any of the other issues. They're all one and done stories. It's great. So if you missed any of the issues. I know they're going to come out with a trade of these, but if you happen to find any of them at the store, you can't go wrong with any of the issues. This has really been a wonderful series. That's going to do it this week. As we always end with public service announcement, I get all my comics at Pulp Fiction Comics in Long Beach, California. And Orion runs a great store. Annie and Eduardo are just great. And they have great pull service. They offer 30% off of trades and graphic novels every day. They carry manga at 20% off. It's a great store if you're in the Long Beach area. There is a sister store, Pulp Fiction Culver City, and it's run by Chris and her team. They're separate stores, same name, but separate stores. And they have a great store, offer great pull service and discounts too. And they're just two great stores. And once again, it's really important to support your local comic shop. If they're having a Black Friday sale, go in, buy some stuff, help them out. This is buy some gifts for people. Comics make great gifts, trades and graphic novels. So definitely support your local comic shop if you can. And please be safe. Please get vaccinated. If you can get a booster shot, get a booster shot. I got mine. And make sure you continue to wear masks and social distance. Be safe out there. And as we always end all of our shows, the most important thing is to be kind. I know the holidays can be great and hard for different people. So once again, being kind is really good. And just be safe out there and be kind to each other. It's things are still tough. I think it might be a rough winter. Things are really tough out there, and being kind is always good. So take care of yourselves, be kind, and we'll do it again next week. Everybody have a great holiday, and we'll do it again next week again. All right. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe and share the video. As always, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.